Hi, it has been a while since my last update video for my Eightenate character model. Unfortunately, I was busy last year between job search and other projects that this update had lapsed. With that said, here are a few details about the style guide I'm building for my project and Eightenate's character model update. About a couple of years ago, I wanted to create a style guide for my world building project. What you see on the screen is an example of these characters, Eightenate, Eightenate, and Guinea, that I have created in 2024. These characters were to be created, sculpted, textured, rigged, and shaded in Blender and posed for a couple of test comment panels for my style guide. Despite delays over the past few years, I still intend to complete this. What I want to focus on for this video is Eightenate here. Eightenate is an Earthikind, a type of Mimikind from my world building project, World of Relics. To briefly explain World of Relics, or WAR for short, imagine a fantasy world full of living object peoples, like giant swords and torches, magical cloaks, and powerful relics, all known collectively as Mimikind. World of Relics was mainly inspired by object shows on YouTube, which are animated competition or slice-of-life series about object characters, like Inanimate Sanity, BFDI, Ion, One, and many other series. Unlike object shows, I had created World of Relics as a form of xenofiction, a fiction genre about non-human characters and creatures that explore their societies, culture, lore, and identities. One day I'll fully explain my world building project and how it differs from object shows as object xenofiction. This project also has other sources of inspiration: the world building from the original Dark Crystal film, and the Netflix series Dark Crystal: Age of Resistance, history and scope from Lord of the Rings films, and the tale of Rise and Fall Empires and Civilizations from the Minecraft-inspired game Thermal Apotheosis, and the emotional journeys from the following book series The Burning by Even Winter, and the 5th season by N.K. Jensen. Earthikind, or the Earthen, in war setting are a type of elemental Mimikind made of stone and crystals, all of whom come in a variety of shapes and sizes, and live in mostly rocky, mountainous areas. In the northern kingdom of Calderia, Calderan Earthikind are spherical and large stone creatures. Eightenate, however, is stunted, about 3 feet tall when standing, an unusual height for adult Calderan Earthen. Her stunted growth was caused by an unfortunate violent encounter with a precious patrol when she was young. She also suffered the lack of important materials that she needed to grow and heal her wounds, which left her with large scars upon her core. Because of this, her second guardian, Penwrythe-Arts, helped her survive in the treacherous rocky environment of Caldera's fjords. When she became 15 years old, Penwrythe-Arts gave Eightenate a damaged sword he had hidden. It was an important status symbol among the late Earthen Revivalists, a group of Calderian healers who were once populous in the kingdom many years ago. After a coup had overthrown the Brother King, the previous Arch of Caldera, many of these revivalists had died out, either thrown into the seas surrounding Caldera, or were crushed with their remains scattered throughout Caldera's fjords. Penwrythe-Arts was a survivor of that coup, and lost many of his revivalist brothers. When he discovered Eightenate as a cure afterwards, he noticed that she lacked the typical iron spines most heroes would have grown to protect themselves. Penwrythe-Arts taught Eightenate how to care for the sword, chip away at its worn edges to remake it into a new, splendorous shape. My initial design of this sword had a hook at its end which would have not survived long in Caldera. This rocky kingdom is largely populated by hardy Earthikind, made of multiple layers of solid living stone. They can weather through any form of damage, including from each other. Their spines, fists, and randoming ability make them a formidable fighters, and the dense sword will not survive in this environment. For inspiration, I came across the following sword designs by different artists: Hero Forge's Persistent Knife, Orc Sword by Dmitry Verkovich, hand-painted stone sword model by Katarzyna Minich, with the original concept created by Carlos Ruiz. Despite her scars, Eightenate grew into an adventurous orphan, and she works as a mercenary within Caldera's cavern. Her job is difficult. She hunts dangerous, foreign war-fitted, and rogue orphans trying to abuse the corruption of the unruly Precious Protos and the Calderan royals that control them, all under the rule of the new Calderan Arch-Vitalite. This line of work does not always pay well, but at least Eightenate is able to afford a cramped hovel in the mid-levels of Caldera's fjords. No matter where she goes, Eightenate's sword can be used as a tool and a weapon. As a tool, Eightenate will use its wish tip to climb walls and navigate vertical caverns. As a weapon, she could use the thick, heavy blade to breach armor and stone, or use its hilt to punch with either the bolts on the hilt side or the stone pommel. While completing her sword, I choose 2 additional poses for Eightenate. One where she's holding the sword, and the other where she carries it on her back. The first pose was straightforward, just to give an idea of its size. Admittedly, Eightenate's sword changes proportion throughout these drawings. This was due to me copying and pasting the sword quarter and side views into different positions to quickly redraw it. As long as the sword's shape is recognizable throughout these drawings, the misproportions can be consistent enough to avoid being an issue. The sword's concept is for a future 3D model anyway, which will be more true to proportion than what I have drawn so far. In the second pose, I have Eightenate holding her sword on her back with her aura. Like many other elementals, Earthenkind have an element-based magic system sourced from their environment, with their elements sourced from the earth. Eightenate, however, was taught Auric, the ability to control one's aura, a common magic that usually belonged to the non-elemental refined kingdoms. Eightenate's aura is used to hold her sword behind her back whenever she needs the full use of her 2 limbs. Eightenate can use her aura to retrieve her sword, on the condition that it is at reasonable length away from her and within her line of sight. Because Eightenate has no human-like anatomy, I had to think about how to show a 2-limbed character would move and express herself. While I looked up real-life examples of this anatomy, note, this is not a comparison between real-life disability and character design, but exploration of how movement and weight distribution for similar anatomies for reference. While researching, I came across Zion Clark from the Truly channel video, The Wrestler with No Legs, Born Different, in the Netflix documentary Zion. Zion Clark is a disabled athlete whose career spanned from wrestling, wheelchair racing, mixed martial art, and grappling. Due to a rare birth defect called the regression syndrome, he was born without legs and relies on his arms and hands for navigation, along with using a wheelchair as an assistive aid. Zion has a website, zionclark.com, that contains his biography, information on his Netflix 2018 documentary Zion, and his career in sports, which I suggest checking out. From watching the Netflix documentary on Zion Clark, the Truly channel video, and the Guinness World Records video on Zion breaking the record for the fastest 20-meter walk on 2 hands, I was able to understand how he moves. The weight of his torso shifts between his arms whenever exercising or walking. Also, the scenes of his wrestling in the documentary gave me ideas of how Eightenate and other Earthenkind would fight using their core's weight and arms. Call-out sheets are references that character artists and concept artists create while working in 3D production environments. These sheets are given to 3D artists to help create 3D models. Call-out sheets usually have characters, asset, or environment details highlighted for 3D artists to reference from. They usually include small details, materials, turnarounds, or modeling details. If you want to know more about callout sheets for concept art, I suggest watching the video Art Direction, Mood Boards, Design Packets, and Callout Sheets by Art of Soulburn. In this callout sheet, I included textures, anatomical proportions for Eightenate's character, the shape of her injuries and scars, and how the wireframe mesh of her eyes and mouth should look like. And finally, the Eightenate character model update. I have updated Eightenate's core and scoot bait textures. The core textures match with her reference, but I added extra detail to the scoot textures to make them more stone-like. She has a cake collar and her tassels. They will be updated later to better match the reference. I have done corrections on Eightenate's eye due to a weird bug. It now works with some minor modifications in the skin wrap modifier and a view layer system. Finally, I added the holdout node setup for the scar over Eightenate's eye. I may need to remodel parts of it to capture the actual shape of Eightenate's scar from her character design sheets, but the holdout node works great. Here's a very rough render test. As for shading, I have built an entire shading network system based on the Lightning Boy Shaders How to Make a Toon Shader series. This series goes in depth on how to make a RGB light-based toon shader. While the official LBS shader is no longer updated for Blender versions 3.5, 4.0, and higher, I have completed this series for Blender 4.2.3. From this series, I created my own shader node setup that is configured for my style. A painterly, soft-shaded texture look with thick outlines and bold colors. The shader setup is separated into a few parts as you see here. While the blend file is public, link to the file is available below in the description. This shader was developed for testing purposes. It may have some bugs. You may use it if you like, but I suggest watching both the original LBS tutorials and reading my documentation to better understand how it works and my goals in using it. This shader has not been tested for Blender 5.0.1 and higher. That's it for the updates. Please check out my other videos and leave a like, comment, subscribe. I'll also have a few upcoming art time lapses coming soon, so keep an eye on those. Thank you, and may you be well.